There is a hidden glitch in the way 2026-era ranking loops decide what shows up in your feed, and it is making the most incompetent people the loudest voices in every niche. Because the algorithm measures attention velocity rather than expertise, and a confidently wrong statement travels almost exactly like a confidently right one until the correction cycle catches up. By rewarding instant clicks over actual accuracy, these engagement-based ranking loops have built a perfect home for a 40-year-old cognitive bias, the Dunning-Kruger effect, to grow on. And the quiet expert who says, "I don't know," is being demoted, while the loud amateur who says the answer is being amplified. We are going to walk through 5 parts that explain exactly why this is happening in 2026, what it really means for the public sphere, and what concrete habits you can use to read any modern feed more clearly, with examples drawn directly from the MIT Media Lab work, the Cornell Origin Study, and the 2024 Dunning-Kruger reanalysis. In 1999, 2 social psychologists at Cornell University, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, ran a series of studies and published the results in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, building on earlier work by other social psychologists including Mazur and Banerjee. And they tested people on logic, grammar, and humor, then asked every participant to estimate how well they had actually done. What they found became one of the most surprising findings in the entire literature on asymmetric self-evaluation. The people who scored worst on those tests almost always thought they had done great, while the people who scored best often thought they had done only okay or even poor. And that predictable gap between real skill and self-assessed skill is the Dunning-Kruger effect in its simplest form. Dunning himself has repeatedly emphasized in interviews and in follow-up writing that this is not a fixed personality trait, that it does not mean anyone is stupid, that it fluctuates from topic to topic, and that people can be trained out of it with the right kind of feedback over time. A 2024 reanalysis by Dana Marie Scahn and her colleagues, building on prior critiques, argued that the famous peak of ignorance graph shown in popular culture was often a statistical artifact of regression to the mean rather than a true curve of confident ignorance. Independent commentary in Scientific American and Psychology Today has stressed that the effect is real at the population level even if its cultural iconography is somewhat exaggerated. And this is the reason every journalist or podcaster who cites the Dunning-Kruger effect always adds the disclaimer, "at the population level," before drawing any conclusion about a specific person. For the purposes of learning to read a feed, the conservative finding is what matters most. Novices reliably rate themselves higher than objective measures justify, while real experts reliably rate themselves slightly lower than objective measures justify. And that gap is exactly what content ranking systems are now optimizing into in real time. The first of our 5 main points is the high confidence paradox, and most people do not realize how completely the modern feed is built to reward it. Modern engagement-based ranking systems do not actually measure whether a post is true. They measure the velocity of attention, meaning how quickly a post is clicked, how long the thumbnail holds a viewer, how rapidly a comment section fills with reactions, and whether the viewer eventually swipes away. Expertise expresses itself in caveats, in hedged claims, in source citations, and in careful disambiguation, none of which produces the kind of stop the scroll, share a second time, comment exploding reactions that ranking loops reward. A confident statement that is factually wrong behaves, to a feed, almost identically to a confident statement that is factually right, because both look the same in the engagement metrics that matter in the first few minutes of a post being live. And the wrong one frequently wins on raw volume because it provokes far more corrective responses that count as additional engagement for the original poster. When a person who knows very little about a domain forms a strong opinion, the Dunning-Kruger pattern predicts they will hold it with unusual resistance to challenge. And that resistance produces a recognizable audio-visual signature in a creator. A steady cadence, declarative sentences, an absence of qualifiers, and a willingness to make absolute predictions about uncertain futures. Researchers who have studied parasocial trust and credibility cues for decades have noted that audiences often confuse certainty with authority even when the underlying evidence is thin. And in a feed where certainty is the cheapest signal in the world to produce, the loudest novice is structurally rewarded for being louder and for refusing to soften any claim. The 4 sub-mechanisms that drive this in the data are well documented in nearly every major creator economy survey since 2022. Engagement velocity cannot distinguish expert rightness from amateur wrongness unless the truth value itself becomes an engagement driver, which it rarely is in the first hours of a post going viral. Experts who use hedge phrases like "the evidence suggests," but produce measurably lower completion rates and lower share rates than creators who say, "the answer is, period." So hedging itself forfeits virality even when it is exactly the right move scientifically. Confidently wrong amateurs draw corrective responses from every corner of the network, so their bold wrongness multiplies reply volume and dwell time, which in turn makes the original post look more important to the recommendation model and gets it shown to even more people. The most common mistake that novices themselves make is mistaking a feeling of fluency for skill. And on a feed, fluent delivery is literally the same metric as competence in the eyes of the ranking loop, even when the underlying knowledge base is shallow or full of errors that a careful expert would have caught in a single minute of checking. Second, and this is the part most viewers do not want to hear, being confidently wrong can actually spread faster than being carefully right. And the data on this subject is older and stronger than most social media commentary suggests. The MIT Media Lab's well-known 2018 study on Twitter, later extended and nuanced in follow-up replication work, found that falsehoods spread farther, faster, deeper, and more broadly than truth, and that this was driven primarily by a small share of very active real human users, sometimes called super spreaders, rather than by bots alone. A 2022 critique revisiting that dataset contested some of the strongest conclusions of the original and stressed that bots had a larger effect than the original authors credited. But it still confirmed the broad pattern that novel and emotionally charged false claims diffuse more easily than cautious, evidence-backed ones, which is the pattern that matters most for understanding feed dynamics in 2026. On video platforms, the dynamic is even more pronounced, because a confident incorrect statement presented in a 60-second clip generates a true cascade of reactions, including agreement from fellow misinformer accounts, outrage from knowledgeable viewers, screenshots from people archiving the moment, stitch replies from creators who want to debunk or build on the original claim, and clip replies that rehost the original video to their own audiences. Every single one of these behaviors inflates the engagement metrics of the original post. So what looks like an organic community response is actually an algorithmic reward signal that pumps the original higher into recommendation feeds. By the time professional fact-checkers complete even an abbreviated verification process, the original content has already circulated through dozens of secondary audiences, often stripped of its original context or framed by hostile commentary that the corrective post did not author. This is the part of the algorithm that is hardest to fix without changing the fundamental metric, because the reason corrective content can spread the original is precisely the same reason the original spread in the first place. Both are unusually emotionally activating, and platforms that weight shares to people who do not follow you especially hard amplify this dynamic. Outsider shares from angry viewers and outsider shares from sympathetic viewers both count equally in the metric. So a tone-deaf or insulting original can outperform a careful one purely on the way the share weighting system treats it, even when the underlying claim is wildly inaccurate. Reporting in The Verge, in Vox, and in Wired through 2024 and 2025 has repeatedly noted that platforms have experimented with dampening the reach of debunking content because their machine classifiers read the corrections as borderline rather than strictly false. Even when trained fact-checkers rate those corrections as accurate, the classifier behavior is one of the key reasons corrections feel useless to the people who actually try to write them. The result is a 5-part reaction asymmetry that compounds daily. False claims produce correction volume. Correction volume boosts the original in the engagement signal. The original is then redistributed through new audiences who never see any context. A single angry outside share often counts for more than dozens of in-network views, so an insulting original can outperform a careful one. And creators who produce bold, confidently wrong content often find that even the negative comments extend their reach into empathy-driven communities they would otherwise never reach. Third, this whole system creates what behavioral psychologists call a reward loop on a variable schedule. And a variable schedule is, in the psychology literature, one of the most psychologically durable reinforcement patterns in existence, harder to extinguish than a fixed reward and harder still than a continuous one. A creator who posts a confidently incorrect video and watches it outperform their correct, careful videos is being reinforced for being confidently incorrect. And over months, this reshapes the creator's own sense of what their audience wants and what their platform rewards, producing a creator who is algorithmically optimized but factually degraded over time. In parallel, the audience develops its own calibration drift. When viewers are repeatedly shown that bold claims travel farther than cautious ones, they learn to read boldness itself as a signal of importance, and they develop a confidence heuristic in which the louder a claim feels, the more central it must be, even when the viewer explicitly distrusts a particular post. Long-term exposure research on recommendation systems has shown that this kind of repeated low-grade nudge can shift downstream outcomes, including voting behavior and purchase decisions, even when individual posts are not obviously false, and the effect compounds quietly across years of feed exposure for the heaviest feed users. Researchers studying the creator economy have noted that audiences habituate to the next shocking thing. So a creator's bold wrong content trains their own audience to expect bolder and bolder wrong content, creating a ratchet effect where each post must escalate to retain the previous baseline, even when the new claim has to be stretched thinner than the last one. Once a creator is sophisticated enough to read their own analytics, they often internalize this dynamic and begin to self-censor the accurate notes they would otherwise include. And the shift from accurate to inaccurate posting is therefore not usually one big catastrophic decision, but a slow gradient produced by repeated small algorithm-aligned adjustments over months and years of consistent posting. The four-part structure of this trap is variable reward reinforcement that the psychology literature shows to be the hardest schedule to extinguish, audience calibration downward as viewers become more tolerant of confident wrongness and their own expertise scales down, a creator ratchet effect that requires escalation to hold the baseline, and a quiet act of self-censoring accurate corrections, since accurate notes lower engagement and creators often unconsciously delete them, locking in a slowly degrading accuracy curve that almost nobody notices from inside the loop. Fourth, nuanced expertise is being quietly priced out of the public square, and the consequences of this are larger than most viewers realize, even when they intuitively feel something is wrong with online discourse. Nuanced expertise manifests in long-form qualified conditional statements, and researchers who study long-form versus short-form content have documented that the average time users spend on a post has fallen sharply since the early 2010s, with attention spans measured in seconds on the heaviest recommendation-driven platforms. By 2025, internal data leaks and creator economy surveys suggest median in-feed video view durations of approximately 30 to 40 seconds on major short video networks, with completion rates dropping sharply past the 15-second mark for the average non-subscribed viewer, which means any careful explanation has to fight a headwind of attention loss before it can even begin to make its case for a hedged, accurate position. Under those attention economics, the kind of content that experts produce naturally is structurally disadvantaged by the ranking system, because a nuanced explanation of why a particular medical trial's headline result is misleading, or why a geopolitical event has competing interpretations, requires longer viewing windows, higher reading literacy, and more patience than the algorithmic window offers to a casual scroller. Many platforms have introduced long-form incentives, but these are typically compensation programs rather than core ranking signals, and the data shows they have had only a modest effect on the median creator's behavior over time. Experts respond in three observable ways to this structural pressure, and each has a real cost. They leave the public feed entirely, costing the public sphere their presence entirely. They adapt by adopting creator-style delivery, sometimes called edutainment or infotainment, which can itself degrade the expertise as it filters through creator heuristics. Or they form parallel creator pools on paid newsletters, on podcasts behind paywalls, on professional-grade newsletters and longer Substack-style publications, which divides the information economy sharply between those who pay and those who do not. The most underappreciated downstream effect of all this is on shared public reference points. When the loudest, most confident amateur version of a topic dominates the feed, every subsequent conversation about that topic is anchored to that amateur version, and people who read carefully do not, in practice, swamp this anchoring, because decades of public opinion research show that high-frequency, low-credibility messages shape baseline beliefs even when they are later corrected. This anchoring erosion is especially strong on contested and emotionally charged topics. So over time, the gap between popular information and accurate information widens to a point where they are no longer really in conversation with each other at all. And that gap is what makes the public sphere feel broken even on topics where factual answers are well established in the underlying research and the underlying data sets. Fifth, there are real evidence-backed habits that can protect your attention and your judgment from this whole system. And they are not complicated once you have them on hand, and you make a point of using them every time you scroll. Look at the ratio of certainty to evidence the moment a creator opens their mouth. Lots of certainty with very little evidence is exactly the Dunning-Kruger danger sign and should immediately lower your trust in the post, no matter how confident the speaker sounds to the ear. Try to find the original primary source the post was based on, because every restatement adds a small chance of compounding error, and most viral posts are several steps removed from any peer-reviewed paper or government dataset or court filing that would let you actually check the claim. Notice what the creator chooses not to say, because the most expert tell in the public record is what a careful person willingly leaves out rather than overclaiming. And a confident amateur almost never shows you their omitted context because they do not realize they are omitting anything. Check the creator's correction history, because regular transparent corrections are a much better signal of real expertise than polished consistency, which is often itself a sign of low engagement with errors rather than actually being right all the time. Verification practices also need to be deliberately fast. Look for institutional sources first. Pull the original peer-reviewed paper rather than its summary. Look for cross-corroboration across independent outlets. And remember that the news cycle is faster than the verification cycle. So even the best heuristics will only get you close to the truth before the next viral post is already 3 generations downstream from the original source. For creators who want to remain accurate and still reach an audience, the trade-off is real, but it is not fatal. Long-form specialists on Patreon and subscription platforms have carved out small, durable audiences who actively reward uncertainty stating as a sign of trust building rather than a sign of weakness. Multi-format creators who pair short-form presence for reach with longer-form channels for depth have outperformed pure short-form creators on cumulative audience trust, according to creator survey data through 2024. And the most reliable pattern in the data is to be honest about uncertainty rather than performing certainty, because audiences who have learned to trust a creator's uncertainty stating routinely reward them with deeper engagement on the topics where the creator does have earned confidence. Critical thinking in this context is best understood as a posture rather than a skill checkbox. Do not let a creator's tone of voice pull you into accepting a claim. Do not let a creator's popularity pull you into accepting a claim. Do not let the appearance of being on your side pull you into accepting a claim. And accept that comfort with a creator's vibe is not the same thing as verification. Accept that being wrong is a normal, recoverable state, while being persistently wrong under pressure of evidence is a sign that further engagement with that source is a net loss for your own epistemic budget and probably is not worth your time. If this changed how you read your feed, the next video goes deep into why a small and critically endangered population of orcas is systematically dismantling luxury yacht rudders off the coast of Spain and Portugal, and what their learned behavior tells us about how intelligent marine mammals are rewriting the rules in shared waters. So tap through and watch that one next. Next,